right, folks, welcome in. It is another brand new edition of the 901 Soccer Podcast. Not just welcome in, but I guess welcome back. It's been a little while. It's been probably close to a month since the last time we've done one of these, and it's probably been more than a month since the last time I've been able to do one of these from the comfort of what we will call my home studio. Let's see. I think the last home game was August 17th against FC Tulsa. And if you'll recall, I did the post game from that one from a hotel room in Nashville. So that means August the 3rd was the last time I was able to do one here for you. That was a 0-0 home draw against El Paso Locomotive, which you might recall, you might not. And if you don't, I don't blame you. Probably the dullest, least interesting, most unimportant game in Memphis 901 FC history. A little bit similar tonight as Memphis 901 FC gets a 0-0 home draw with the Hartford Athletic. The good news is, and we'll get more into this as the show rolls on, Memphis 901 FC now unbeaten in 10 straight home games. So I'm going to talk about what happened in the game tonight. I'm going to talk about the attendance. It was much better than I expected. If you'll recall, the last episode, I was in full-on, it's over, panic time, where do we go from here mode, because it's football season now. I'm a little bit more optimistic after tonight. We'll touch on that in a minute and what I think. And then if you paid attention to me or to Bluff City Media at all during the week, which, by the way, this is the 901 Soccer Podcast. I'm Lawrence Dockery on Twitter at LDoc93. The 901 Soccer Podcast is on Twitter at 901 Soccer Pod. We are, of course, part of Bluff City Media, and Bluff City Media is on Twitter at BluffCity_media. And we're on Facebook as well. Just search 901 Soccer. We'll pop right up, and search Bluff City Media, and we'll pop right up. And, of course, you can be an insider and a subscriber on the Bluff City Media website and enter our Discord. And that's not just Memphis 901 FC, though I would love to have you in there talking Memphis 901 FC. There's Tigers men's and women's soccer. There's plenty of Tiger football discussion with, them possibly being one of the favorites from the group of five to go to the college football playoff this year. Apologies for my voice. I seem to be losing it for some reason. It's probably because I talk too much. But anyway, that's where you can find us on all the socials. But as I mentioned a second ago, if you paid attention to the Bluff City Media website or any of the socials this week, you'll know that I posted a story about Jay Mims no longer being in the Memphis 901 FC front office as their COO. Nothing wild or outrageous or anything in there. I think it's just a case of, everybody has those relationships where it works well, but people just want different things. And I think that's probably what the case was here. And we'll touch a little bit more on that to close out the show tonight. But first and foremost, Memphis 901 FC gets a 0-0 draw with the Hartford Athletic. Like I said, Memphis 901 FC is now unbeaten in 10 straight home games, dating all the way back to the last home loss. So all the way back to May 4th. The last home loss for 901 FC, which is a game where I don't believe that I was there for, I think I was out of town refereeing, was April the 20th, 2-1 against Monterey Bay. It was the last Memphis 901 FC home loss. So we're talking April, May, June, July, August. So it's been 5 months since the last home loss. That's a nice chunk of change. That's a nice stretch of time there. They haven't all been barn burners by any stretch of the imagination. I mentioned the El Paso game. And the San Antonio game right before that was a little bit of a slog, but they were down several players, probably 5, 6, 7 players through a variety of injury or suspension, and they were able to grind out a 1-0 win. That was a mentality, that was a culture win for this team. If you'll recall, that was the Aaron Seeger backup keeper on as an auxiliary striker in the 93rd minute game. Most recently, that they had a 2-0 win at home against Tulsa, but tonight against Hartford, it wasn't dull and boring as the 0-0 scoreline might suggest. That's something we all as soccer fans have to explain to the haters out there that, believe it or not every game is 0-0, and even ones that are, it can actually be quite entertaining. The example that I always use when talking about that was the Mexico versus Brazil game at the 2014 World Cup. That's one of the most insane, incredible soccer games that I've ever watched, and it finished 0-0. So tonight was just one of those ones where 901 I think, tied the record for most shots in a game with 27 or 28. 27 or 28. I have forgotten. But that either tied or broke the record for shots in a game in Memphis 901 FC history. And everybody had great. I asked Coach Glass after the game if Emerson Hindman is maybe just one of the unluckiest players he's ever coached, because I swear he's like an artillery gunner, like an old school artillery gunner when you did it all by sight or by radio correction rather than electronics. You would find the range. You'd shoot too high and you drop it down and realize that you shot too low and correct, and so on and so forth until you got it where it needed to go. And that's kind of Emerson Hindman shooting from outside the box. Sometimes it's this one just goes over the bar, so then he corrects, and this one's on the ground and the keeper makes save. This one too far to the left, so then overcorrect and too far to the right. And eventually you would like to think he's going to get a goal out of it. But tonight was one of those nights where not only was 901 FC just a little bit unlucky, they almost scored a fantastic goal after just some great combination play where Emerson Hyman, you looked like it was a sure thing, like he was for sure going to score, and it goes off the inside of the post and comes out, only for either Bruno Lapa or Oscar Jimenez to rip one off the crossbar about 8 seconds later. And those are the ones where you're thinking, man, you won it back because you wanted to score it, but I don't know that there's anything different that either one of those guys could have done in that situation. I mean, the keeper's coming out on Hindman and he plays it through and it just goes off the post. It's just so unfortunate that it just always happens to be Emerson Hindman as the one that is just oh so close, but yet oh so far away from scoring the goal. Also, Leston Paul tonight had two just ones where you could just see the visions of the celebration dancing in your head. And that's something that got us thinking in the press box. Has Leston Paul ever scored a goal for 901 FC? That's not really his forte. That's not what his responsibility is or even has been. And so we're thinking, no, we can't think of one in the last couple of years. And if he had, we're like, it had to have been in 2019 during the debut season. And we asked, and as it turns out, he has not, which surprised me. I would have figured he would have gotten at least one, but that's not necessarily his role. He's not a goal scorer. And he was close probably 2, maybe 3 times tonight. There was one where he let one rip from just outside the circle on top of the 18-yard box, and you thought, oh, that's a goal of the week candidate right there, and it didn't get through, so that was a bummer. And then he had one off a corner kick where he gets just, I don't know that anybody anywhere in the world could have headed it any better than he did. Just perfect power right where it needed to be, and the goalkeeper makes a flying save and tips it up over the crossbar. And Stephen Glass after the game was like, yeah, this is like the 3rd or 4th time this year where we've just run into a keeper who's been on one. I don't know. Maybe it's something about when we play in Memphis. But he's right. I mean, there's and he did elaborate on that. He's not just chalking it up to, well, goalkeeper was good, nothing we could do. He said, no, with the amount of chances that we created, you feel like we probably should have put 1 or 2 of those in. There were 1 or 2 other games this year where it felt like that needed to be a goal more so than it was tonight. But I like the mentality. I like the he's like, look, we could be just satisfied with, hey, 10th straight game at home without a loss, clean sheet, get the point, move on down the road. But he said, I'm never going to be happy with not winning. And that's a mentality that I can get behind and support. I wish there were a lot more other coaches and teams and organizations and various sports and various leagues around the country that had that same mentality. And that's one thing that from start to finish this year, I think it needs to be said, I have been impressed with Memphis 901 FC's mentality. They haven't laid an egg really, but maybe once this year, where they just went out and were just like, Um, and I don't even think it was that. I think that Orange County game in July was a little bit rough, but other than that, there haven't been any. They've been very into it, if that makes sense. Which may or may not have been the case last year, but there's buy-in, there's all of that good stuff, and they're it can get frustrating when you have games like this, and it feels like they've had several of these, especially at home, where you feel like you do everything right and you don't get a reward for it. That's frustrating. I would imagine not just in sports, but in life as well. But at the end of the day, it's unbeaten in 10 straight at home, and they're still in the playoff places. And the West is so incredibly tight. Going into the game tonight, with the win, they would have gone all the way up to second. And I think they're in fifth right now. And I don't know. The last I saw, Tulsa and Vegas were tied. Tulsa had gone up 1-0. That's one that you would prefer Tulsa to win, since they're down in eighth and Vegas is right behind you. So, but you get another home game on Saturday. And, but just tonight, it's just, I don't know that you want to chalk it up just as one of those nights, because if you chalk it up as one of those nights, it feels like you're having a lot of one of those nights. And at that point, it doesn't just become one of those nights when you've had three of those nights. That's a lot of wordplay. My apologies. But coming up, you got 6 games left in the regular season. 3 of them at home, 3 of them are on the road. You're at home Saturday against North Carolina, 7 p.m. That's a fireworks game. Everybody should be there for that. Tiger football's on the road at Florida State, so there's no excuse to not be there. Then you're September the 28th at Louisville City. That's a Wednesday. That's not a Wednesday. Is that a Wednesday? No, that's a Saturday. Saturday, I was going to say, because if that was Wednesday, I would probably be going to cover it. But there's a tournament at Mike Rose, 27, 28, and 29. And I had figured that I was going to referee instead of going on the road to Louisville. But if it was a Wednesday, I would have gone. But no, Wednesday, the 28th is a Saturday. I don't know how that got messed up. But anyway, so at home this Saturday against North Carolina, on the road 2 weeks later at Louisville City. Then you have at home against Oakland on October the 5th, at home against Sacramento for the regular season home finale on October the 12th. That's going to be a tough one, but that is the final fireworks game of the season. And then you close it out with 2 games on the road at Phoenix and at New Mexico. That's a tough one, too, to close out the season. But the West is very tight. You keep getting points and putting pressure on these other teams, and eventually one of them is going to slip up. And you just need to get you're comfortably in the playoff places. I'd like to get a little bit more comfortably inside the home playoff places. But like I said, it's tight. I mean, between 5th and 2nd, there's 2 points. That's crazy. So not a whole lot about the game tonight, obviously, with it being 0-0, other than Emerson Hyndman had some really good chances and was unlucky. Just, again, you hate it. You hate it for him, because he's like, at some point, one of these is going to have to drop. Just the law of averages says one of them is going to have to drop. So Emerson Hyndman, unlucky not to get a goal. And then Leston Paul, really unlucky not to get a goal, as he had 2 that just you could see it. You could see it happening, and it didn't happen. So that moves us to the attendance for tonight, which I mentioned in the open. I was pleasantly surprised with. Attendance tonight was 3,013. It was Hometown Heroes Night. A lot of first responders out there. They had police cars, fire trucks. I think they had like the mobile crime scene unit van thing out there, which looked cool. They had some sort of touch the fire truck contest, which looked pretty cool. I mean, if that's how you want to get kids and families and whatnot to games, that's the way to do it. I have yet to meet a child that doesn't think fire trucks are the coolest thing ever. Be them toy fire trucks or real fire trucks. I'm 30 years old, and I think fire trucks are still pretty damn cool. So the organization, they had a bye week. right? So they played back on August the 28th on the road in Colorado Springs. And then they had a week off, and then they played again tonight, and they play again on Saturday. So with them coming home, and you got 2 home games that allowed them to get out and about in the community. And to their credit, not only were they out and about in the community, they were very visible and voiceful of being out and about in the community. They were doing events with the Shelby County Health Department, with the Memphis Fire Department, with the Shelby County Sheriff's Office. This past weekend, and I can vouch for this because I was out there all weekend refereeing at Micros at the Soccer Elite, that they had a tent set up and they were out there all day selling tickets, selling merch, all that good stuff, doing giveaways. More of that, please. It's tried and true. These things work. And so credit to them, because if you'll recall that last podcast episode we did, my brain wasn't, my expectations were that attendance was going to go into free fall mode because football season had started. As it turns out, the city continues to not give a rat's ass about Tiger football, which is just a damn shame, because they're one of the best. They've been one of the best teams in this city for a decade. And football is how you get into a bigger conference. But this is not a Memphis Tigers football show. If somebody out there that does have a Memphis Tigers football show would like to have me on to pontificate, I'd be more than happy to do so. That's just very depressing that nobody goes to Tiger football games. It's very, very depressing, because it doesn't have to be like that. The same can be said for Memphis 901 FC. It's very depressing that nobody goes to Memphis 901 FC games, because it doesn't have to be like that. To the organization's credit, you got 3,000 people out for a Wednesday night game when you haven't had a home game for a month. And doing all of those events with all of those organizations, and then showing up at Micros when there was a big tournament, I think plays a very big part in that. And I applaud them for that. I commend them for that. And I suggest that they do more of that. One of the conversations that I've had is that there is actually a real full-time soccer staff over there now. So that's good. My understanding is that they hired somebody away from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who was there when they won the Super Bowl several years ago, the COVID year that was Brady's 7th. That's kind of a whoa hire. I don't remember exactly what his official job title is, but if you're bringing in somebody, not like from the NFL, that's the one thing. To bring them in from a team that won a Super Bowl in the last 5 years is also mega impressive. And I've said it before, and I'll say it again. I understand a lot of you people, and you have voiced these concerns to me. I have answered them to the best of my ability, but based on the way that they're signing players, the way that they're wording the press releases when they get these players, all their statements, they are operating like a team that is planning on being here for a long time. So they hired away a guy from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. That's impressive. They're getting out. They're doing these events. They've got more events coming up for these last 3 home games, and those announcements are going to be made in the coming days. I'm going to let them do that. I don't want to steal their thunder, even though I'm aware of what they are. I'm going to let them do that. But 3,013 tonight is, in the grand scheme of things, would I like that number to be higher? Absolutely, yes, I would like that number to be higher. I think Memphis 901 FC would like that number to be higher as well. But considering what we've seen basically the last 2 years, for this being a Wednesday night, that is not too shabby, and they deserve credit for making the players visible and the organization visible in the city. And this brings us, and we're going to close the show out with this. This brings us to, like I mentioned, the news that I put out there earlier this week, and that is that Jay Mims is no longer the COO for Memphis 901 FC. So you can go over to the Bluff City Media website, bluffcitymedia.co, and read the story. It's not a long one, but it is, I think, newsworthy that Jay Mims is not there anymore. because he is from Memphis and he was brought in this offseason. They created this position for him, and he did about as well of a job as anybody could have expected him to. He brought in a soccer staff. They didn't have that. They had people pulling double duty for the Redbirds and 901 FC, which is economical. I mean, if you're operating on a tight budget, sometimes that's what you got to do. But that just leaves you stretched too thin. And we've seen that with the lack of visibility of this organization in this city basically since COVID. And Jay Mims came in and began the process, started the project, whatever you want to call it, of really turning this into a functioning soccer organization. He gets a lot of the credit. I don't know that he necessarily gets all of the credit. All of the hires that, my understanding is that all the hires that he made had to get signed off on by ownership. So ownership was aware of what was going on. They didn't just have their heads in the sand. But as it turns out, you can take the coach off the bench, but you can't take the coach out of that didn't come out right. I was trying to make a cool little play on words, but at the end of the day, what I was told is that as well as he did on the business side, and he did very well of it with sponsorships and partnerships and a soccer staff, is that Jay just wanted to be more involved in the soccer. And, sometimes you have relationships that work really well, but you get to a point where you just want different things, and there's no animosity. There's no ill will. There's none of that. There's none of that. Nothing wild or salacious or outrageous or nothing crazy going on here. This is just a guy that was a very successful coach, wants to be involved in making soccer decisions, be it on-field coaching, be it roster building, talent acquisition, whatever you want to call it. So that's really what the gist of the story is. And, that's from what the source that I spoke to at Memphis 901 FC told me. And, it's not the end of the world. It's a bummer. I'm bummed out. I liked Jay. Jay was always very nice enough to come into the press box when he had a minute during the game and talk to the media that was covering the team. And usually that was just me and John Varlas from the Daily Memphian. Sometimes it was just me. I'm sure there were maybe 2 games this year where it was just John Varlas. But, so I did appreciate that personal touch from him. I did appreciate that. All the best to him and wherever he goes from here. I don't have anything bad to say. All of my interactions with Jay Mims were nothing but positive. So I've got nothing but good things to say about the guy. It sounds like that's also the mood inside of Memphis 901 FC as well. There's no ill will. It's just people wanted different things, and that's okay. And by the sound of it, the staff and processes and whatever you can call it that have been put in place by ownership and by Jay means that this operation is going to keep chugging right along just like it has this year. And, if you guys have paid attention to the show at any point this year, I've been more complimentary of this organization than ever before, not just in the way that they went about building the roster, but in the way they've gotten out in the community, and they've been more visible doing these events. And, that was one thing that they told us, look, we did all these events last year. But you never said anything about it. You never let anybody know. You never posted it on socials, and you never took pictures. You never did any of that. So that kind of defeats the purpose. And they've done a much better job of that this year. I know Caleb Patterson-Sewell's been involved in some of that. Jay obviously was probably involved in some of that. I'm sure ownership was involved in some of that. So it seems like they're starting to figure it out. And like I said, they're acting like an organization that is going to be here for a while. And I certainly hope that that's the case, because the only time that I have ever not liked covering this team was in 2020 during the COVID season. And there was obviously the complicating factors of you had to wear a mask, which sucked, and you couldn't have a press box meal, which sucked. And the thing that sucked the most in 2020 was the team. They were terrible. It was awful. Like, I hated covering those games. And I think there were only like 10 of them at home, maybe even less than that. I think maybe 10 if you include the season opener before COVID. But I love covering this team and going to midweek availability and going to games. And it certainly helps that they've been to 3 straight playoffs and are looking in good shape to make a 4th. So all the best to Jay in whatever he does from here. I personally have nothing but good things to say about him. And it seems like that it was just a case of he wanted to be more involved in soccer, and 901C wanted him more involved on the business side. And, at the end of the day, better to do that now than to wait until 3 days before the start of the next season and have everything fall apart. And it looks like they're already doing a good job. They're already getting season ticket sales fired up for next year. So they're doing that in late August, early September. I think that deserves a little bit of commendation instead of waiting until February. So look, I think they've heard us, and I think they are really making strides to try to do what needs to be done to make this a top flight soccer organization and get more people to come to these games. Obviously, I understand there's stuff that they can't control about perceptions or other local media outlets or whatever. I'm going to keep doing what I can, and you all should keep doing what you can as well. All right, that's going to do it tonight. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. I'm Lawrence Dockery. You can find me on Twitter at LDoc93. Find the 901 Soccer Podcast on Twitter at 901 Soccer Pod. Bluff City Media on Twitter at Bluff City_media. Find us on Facebook. Just go to Facebook and search 901 Soccer and search Bluff City Media. Subscribe to Bluff City Media on YouTube. That should have been what I led with, because if you're watching this, that's where you're watching it, on YouTube. Like, comment, subscribe, whatever all the YouTube people like to say these days. Hopefully we'll be talking to you after a happy fireworks night on Saturday against North Carolina.